Hello, everyone. My name is William Fu, and welcome to SALY, or Science as a Lifestyle for Youth. This is a science club aimed towards elementary school kids just to give them a basic foundation of various topics in science, give them a feel for the scientific method, get them familiar with some of the amazing science research and things going on in the modern day, and also just learn about how fun science can be and how it can be relevant and it can apply to many things in their lives right now. Today's topic is life science and specifically ecology. Here's just a general layout of today's topics. First, you'll get to know a little bit about me and what this club and these video lessons are going to be about, and then we'll hop into our ecology lessons. So first, a little bit about me. My name is William Fu. I'm a junior currently at Neuqua Valley High School. I'm a part of Science Olympiad, which is a competitive science club. And in Science Olympiad, I've been exposed to a lot of different topics in science, from biology, things like anatomy, proteins, chemistry lab, earth science events, ecology. I also enjoy a lot of other things like basketball, watching the NBA. I also run cross country and track and field, as you can see in the picture. I love singing. I love all types of music from folk to country to rap. I love string cheese. I love Star Wars and building Legos. And just some heads up, if you guys have any questions or feedback, you can always contact me at this email below. So sadly, because of the coronavirus, this kind of coincided right when my club was starting. So this is the first lesson that I'm actually giving about this club. And while this isn't ideal and it's kind of sad that I can't see all of your faces right now, I see a lot of positives and good things from these videos. Like, I will try to make this as interactive and fun as possible for you guys. I will ask you questions and give you time to pause the video and think about the questions yourself, because I think it's very important in science to develop that independent thinking and being able to take your previous knowledge and just your creative thinking to think of solutions. And hopefully, I will be able to create some activities that you guys can all follow along at home. And like I said before, you can always contact me at this email for questions, feedback, or just to connect and get to know me more. Okay, let's hop into today's lesson. So, what is ecology? I'm not sure if many of you have heard about this before, but ecology is the study of interactions between organisms with one another and their environments. So essentially, it's how your favorite plants and animals are connected to each other and how they adapt to and how they survive in their environments. Why they are what they are, why they do what they do, and how they interact and communicate and act with each other. Kind of like how at school you might interact with the other kids, and at school how you might interact and talk to the teacher. And it's that same relationship, but with the plants and animals in nature. So today we will be learning specifically about symbiotic relationships. I know this is a big word, but this is just essentially how organisms, which are just any living thing, how these living things interact with one another, how they benefit off one another, how they harm one another, or sometimes how they're just not affected at all. Because a big part in ecology, remember, ecology is the study of organisms with one another and their environment. So today we're specifically talking about how organisms are interacting with one another, what these organisms do with one another. So today we will be going over 3 topics specifically in symbiotic relationships. We will be going over mutualism, which is where both organisms benefit. As you can see in the picture, there is 2 hearts hugging each other because they both benefit. Like these 2 hearts are happy and are having fun. They're both doing good things to one another. And then we will talk about commensalism, another big word, which is where one organism, remember, an organism is anything that's living, anything that's alive. It can be an animal, it could be a plant. So commensalism is where one organism benefits and the other is not affected at all. So as you can see in this picture, there is a giant, probably, I don't know, as tall as a building. And he's holding a huge turkey. That turkey is probably as tall as your house. So if you imagine, if you're so small compared to this giant, if you took a little bite, or if you had a full meal of that giant's turkey, and that turkey's the size of a house, that giant isn't going to notice because you're so small and you're not having that much impact. But you are getting a full meal, which is why you benefit, and you get a lot of food. That seems like a lot of food to you, so you benefit. But the giant doesn't even notice. The giant is not affected. So that is what commensalism is. And then parasitism is where one organism benefits and the other one is harmed. So as you can see in this picture right here, this is a bully bullying this smaller boy, asking him for his lunch money and taking his lunch money. Hopefully, not many of you have experienced bullying, but obviously, when you're getting bullied, you're getting harmed and you're not getting any benefits. It's bad for you. While the bully, he gets your lunch money and he gets the benefit of that. So that is parasitism. Now we will be going more in detail about these 3 symbiotic relationships. So the first one is commensalism. So one example of commensalism is sharks and the remora fish. As you can see in the picture, the big fish is obviously the shark. And then these smaller fish that are stuck on the sides of the shark are the remora. So the remora fish attach itself to the shark and it kind of hitches a ride. It gets a free ride on the shark for transportation. So it basically gets a free taxi ride on the shark, and it gets to eat all the food that is left over from the shark. And this is commensalism. Remember, commensalism is when one organism benefits and the other is not affected. So this is commensalism. It's because the remora gets a free taxi ride and it gets to eat all the leftover food, but it's commensalism because the shark isn't affected. The shark doesn't really mind. It's such a small fish and it doesn't bother the shark. So the shark doesn't mind it hitching a ride. So the shark gets no benefit. So that's commensalism. Now for an example of mutualism. An example is bees and flowers. Remember, mutualism is where both organisms benefit. Okay? So now is a time for you to pause the video and independently think, what do you think is the relationship between bees and flowers? How do bees benefit from this relationship? And how do flowers benefit from this relationship? Remember, a big part of science is having that independent creativity and critical thinking. So pause the video right now and take some time to think, what could possibly bees get from this relationship and what can flowers get from this relationship? And you might want to think, what do bees make? Why do bees go to flowers? Why might bees need to go to these flowers? Okay, you can pause the video now. Okay, hopefully now you've done some critical thinking, and now I will move on. But remember, even though if you're not 100% correct, that's okay, because a big part of independent thinking and a big part of science is being wrong. You're not always going to be right, and usually most of the time you're not going to be right, but it's all about trying, and it's all about doing as much thinking as you can. So the answer is the pollen from the flower gets stuck on the bees. So as bees go from flower to flower, other flowers get pollinated. So pollen, which is some of you might have pollen allergies, is kind of like the little specks, the little like it looks like dust that the flower has. But that pollen, that dust from the flower, is actually how the flower reproduces and makes other flowers. So the bees help the flower make other flowers and reproduce. And the bees benefit because the bees get the nectar, which is like the food from the flowers. It's this, think of it like if you have a favorite drink, like a favorite sweet drink. The bees get this nectar from the flower, and the bees can make this into honey, which the bees eat. So this is mutualism. Remember, mutualism is where both organisms benefit. This is mutualism because the flower gets uses the bees to help it reproduce and make more flowers, and the bees benefit because the bees can make honey and food from the flowers. Here's another example of mutualism, which is the clownfish and sea anemone. Anemone. Sorry, it's a hard word to pronounce. So as you can see right here, this is a clownfish, which is the orange and white fish. And you might remember from watching Disney's Nemo movie that this is what a clownfish looks like. And a sea anemone and a sea anemone is this kind of things with like these like tentacles. It's kind of like, kind of spongy. It's this plant right here. Okay, so now take some time and you might want to pause the video to take as much time as you need to think, what is the relationship between sea anemones and clownfish? Okay, you can pause the video now. Okay, hopefully now you have unpaused the video and you've given some time to think about what could the possible relationship be. And the answer is that clownfish, which is the Nemos, are the only fish that don't get stung by the tentacles of the sea anemone because the clownfish have this slimy mucus that covers them that protects them from the sea anemone. So usually the sea anemone would shock the other fish. The sea anemone wants to protect itself from the other fish. So its tentacles shock with electricity these other fish. And the clownfish gets a meal by cleaning away fish and algae leftovers from the anemone, which hunts fish. Okay, so the clownfish gets a meal from the sea anemone, which is how it's benefits. So the clownfish gets a free meal because the sea anemone gets to hunts other fish. Remember, the sea anemone stings these other fish with its tentacles. So sea anemones are benefited because they are given better water circulation because the clownfish fan their fins when they're swimming about. So you don't want to have, dirty water with all these leftovers and everything. So the clownfish, by, flapping their fins, create that better water circulation and clear out the bad water. Another example of mutualism is the Nile crocodile and the Egyptian plover bird. So you might think that, isn't this a little dangerous for the bird? Like, this bird is right in the jaws of the crocodile. Why would the bird want to do this voluntarily? So take some time to think, what is the relationship between the crocodile and the plover bird? And remember, this is mutualism. So how can they both benefit and get good things from this? So you can pause the video now. Okay, hopefully now you've unpaused and given it some thought. So the answer is that the plover bird eats the meat between the crocodile's teeth. So you might think, when you're eating, sometimes you might get food stuck in your teeth. That's why you have to floss. The same thing happens with crocodiles. When they eat something, they sometimes get that leftover food stuck in their teeth. So the food stuck in the mouth of the crocodile can cause infection. Just like how you have to go to the dentist to prevent cavities. It's the same concept. These crocodiles don't want to have their teeth to become infected. So the plover bird benefits the crocodile by cleaning the leftover food from the crocodile's teeth. So when a crocodile needs its mouth cleaned, it will just open its mouth and wait for a plover bird to fly in and clear out its teeth. And how does this benefit the plover bird? Well, the plover bird gets a free meal by eating the leftovers. So remember, mutualism is where both organisms benefit. So the crocodile gets a free dentist appointment, and the plover bird gets a free meal. So the last topic is parasitism. And remember, parasitism, like we said before, was where one organism benefits and the other is harmed. So remember, this is kind of like bullying, where one person is not getting anything good, is getting harmed, while the other organism, the other thing, gets a lot of benefits and gets some good things out of it. So some example of parasitism is mosquitoes and ticks. Now you can take some time and pause the video now to think about. I bet a lot of you have experienced mosquitoes, especially. Now you can take some time to think what which organism is benefiting and which organism is being harmed. Okay, hopefully you've unpaused the video now. And the answer is, as many of you might know, mosquitoes and ticks drink blood for a meal. So these mosquitoes and ticks are the bullies in this situation. And they're getting a meal by drinking your blood. I know it's disgusting, but that's just how these mosquitoes and ticks live. And humans and many other animals that mosquitoes and ticks bite on, these animals are harmed. And by obviously, we get our blood taken away, but we are harmed also because we can get these diseases from mosquitoes and ticks. Mosquitoes and ticks, a lot of them carry Lyme disease and the West Nile virus. So these mosquitoes and ticks are the bullies because they can give us all these diseases while they get a meal. It's not very fair, is it? Okay, now that we've talked about mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism, you can think about how these ecology topics relate to your life. Think about like a lot of animals and insects and plants in nature can't survive alone. Like those plover birds sometimes rely on the crocodile to get a meal. Those remora fish sometimes rely on sharks to get a ride around and rely on those sharks to get food. And even though it's unfair, those mosquitoes and ticks rely on feeding on other animals to get their food and survive. These animals, insects, and plants can't survive alone together very oftentimes and need one another to survive. And how does this relate to you? You can think about how this relates to you in many aspects in your life. Just like how you need your parents and your parents also need you. This is a sense of mutualism. Remember, mutualism is where both organisms benefit. And you are an organism, and so are your parents, because an organism is any living thing. And so your parents benefit because they get all the joy and fulfillment from having a wonderful kid. And then you benefit because your parents provide you with food, they provide you with a house, they provide you with the opportunities to do sports and go to school. So you both need each other and you both get good things from one another. So you can think about these symbiotic relationships as also teaching you a lesson that you can't always do it on your own. Even tough crocodiles and sharks can't do it by themselves. They need these little remora fish and these little plover birds to help them out. So, just like these sharks and crocodiles, even though you might be tough and you think you can do it on your own, sometimes you need some help. So, with your friends, help each other out, work together, be friendly to one another, be nice to one another, because as humans, we all need each other to survive and to have an enjoyable life and to be happy. So, now for an independent activity. Remember, like I said, a big part of science is just taking some time to just think and to brainstorm. So, what I want you guys to do is to first brainstorm one thing that helps you and that helps you too. Remember, this is mutualism where both organisms benefit. For example, an example of mutualism might be you and your dog. The dog gives you happiness and you give it food, so you both benefit. Or another example could be your librarian. You get books from the librarian and you get to read many wonderful books, and the librarian benefits by getting more people to read, and because the librarian loves reading. Or you can think of your lawn and mowing lawns. You might hire someone to mow your lawn. That person gets money, and then you get a clean shortcut lawn, like many other businesses and stores. So take some time to brainstorm by yourself one thing that helps you and that helps you too. So you can think of your own example of mutualism in your life. And then the second thing I want you to think about is what is one thing that harms you and that benefits from you. So remember, this is parasitism, where one thing is the bully and one thing is harmed. So remember, an example could be mosquitoes or bullies, but I want you to take some time to try to think by yourself what is one thing that harms you and what benefits you and benefits from you. Think of a real life example of parasitism that applies to your life. And then the third thing I want you to think about is what is one way you can be more helpful to people that help you. Remember, this is commensalism. Commensalism is where one thing helps another thing, but it doesn't get anything in return. Like an example could be volunteers. Volunteers don't get paid, but they spend their time to help others. And while they might not get any money or things like that, they want to do these things out of the good of their heart. So think of how maybe like you can be more helpful to your teachers, to your parents. What is one way where you can pay back those people who participate in commensalism, those people who don't expect anything in return, those people that go out of their way to help others? How can you help those very nice and sweet people? So you can pause the video now and take as much time as you need to think of these three questions. And this is probably one of the most important parts of this lesson. And because with science, you can learn as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's very important to apply that science to your life. See what impact and what application, how that science is related to your own life. And I find that if you can apply science to your own life, it makes science a whole lot more fun and it makes life a whole lot more enjoyable as well. So take as much time as you need. There's no rush. Pause the video and think about these three questions. Okay, hopefully now you've unpaused the video and given some thought to these three questions. And now it's time for just a quick summary about what you learned today. So remember, we were introduced to the topic of ecology. And ecology is the study of the interactions between organisms with one another and their environment. It's how your favorite plants and animals are connected to one another. And today, we specifically focused on symbiotic relationships, which is focusing on the interactions between organisms with one another. That's a big part of ecology. So, we talked about symbiotic relationships, how organisms interact with one another. And we talked about commensalism, which is where one organism benefits, like the shark, and where one organism benefits, which is the remora, and one organism is not affected at all, which is like the shark. And then we learned about mutualism, which is where both organisms benefit and have good things happen to them. So it's like the bees and the flowers. The flowers got the benefit of having the ability to reproduce and make more flowers using the bees. And the bees benefit because the bees can make food from the flower's nectar. And then parasitism, which is where one organism benefits and the other organism is harmed. So this is like the bully example, and the mosquitoes are the bullies in this case because the mosquitoes feed on humans and can give humans diseases. While the mosquitoes gets a free meal, humans are harmed because they can get diseases. So I hope you all had a good time today, had some fun, did some independent thinking, and learned some science. And I just hope that you guys will all join me next time, which is when we will talk about food chains, food webs, conservation, and some ecology that's going on today. Again, I just want to thank you all for spending the time with me to learn about the wonderful topics of science. And I hope you all have a good day and are taking care and staying safe during these times of quarantine. And I'll see you next time.